Welcome to Novara Live. I'm Michael Walker, and I'm once again joined in the studio by Bastani. Great to have you back.
It's great to be here in this festive season, Michael. It's dark outside. It's a little bit cold as well, but I'm nice and cozy with my great compadre, Michael Walker.
We are discussing Christmas today because Aaron's got some strong feelings about it. You've been writing articles, you've been posting tweets. You got a theory about what Christmas has become in this country. We won't reveal it yet. You can wait. That's our final story. And we've got a great interview coming up, actually, about what's going on between Trump and Venezuela. Also, this story is pretty crazy. The Guardian has revealed that last year, Britain threatened to defund the International Court of Justice if it prosecuted Benjamin Netanyahu. That's according to the chief prosecutor. And as I say, we'll end on Aaron's Christmas message. Before we get going, because it is Christmas, we have a merch plug. Apparently people buy things at this time of year. Novara Media book bundles are the real hot ticket at the moment. So Ash's book bundle includes her own book, Minority Rule, plus Girl on Girl by Sophie Gilbert and Love in Exile by Sean Fay. You get 10% off the price of all three if you buy them together. Next Friday is the cutoff for postage before our Christmas break. So if you've got a loved one who loves great books, that is the bundle to buy. As ever, if you'd like to support our work, you can sign up at novaramedia.com/support, and do make sure to let us know your comments in the YouTube chat. You can also, of course, buy this. They're selling like hotcakes. You can buy that on the Novara Media website shop, novaramedia.com/shop. Is it?
Or shop.novaramedia.
Either way, takes you to the same place.
.com.
Reform UK have long been leading in the polls, and now, according to the Times, they are also the largest party in Britain by membership. The development isn't because Farage's party has had a sudden surge in new members excited by racial slurs, he said when a teenager at Dulwich College, but rather because Labour has lost so many of its sub-paying activists. Starmer's party now has less than 250,000 members, down from 330,000, which it had at the time of the general election, of course, much, much lower than the 560,000 members Labour had at the height of Corbynism. Tom Witherow from The Times shared the latest party membership figures on X. So we can have a look. So Reform, you can see there, 268,000. That's according to the ticker on their website. Labour, fewer than 250,000. That's according to a leak. The Greens, we know they're more than 180,000 because Zach Palansky's been tweeting about it. The Tories on less than 123,000, and the Lib Dems around 83,000. Aaron, this is more, I think, kind of confirmation of what people had long suspected because Labour hadn't been particularly open about their membership numbers. Does it matter, though? I suppose in my intro I said, this is way down from the height of Corbynism when Labour had 560,000 members. Obviously, that didn't lead to election wins. Does it matter if a party has lots of members?
It didn't lead to an election win, but they did get 32% in the general election, which I think right now Keir Starmer would...
You mean 40%, right?
In 2019.
In 2019, right.
Even their nadir, when you look at the polls now for Labour on 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, it's a whole different universe, isn't it? So it does matter, not least because Labour are looking short with regards to funding for local elections next year. And as much as people like Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer want to say to members, the door's over there, leave. In a perfect world, those people stay, they pay the direct debits, they deliver the literature, and they shut up. That's the perfect member for people at the top of political parties normally. But people are leaving. And so there is a deficit, therefore, of people able to distribute literature, campaign locally. And those direct debits are really, really critical. For something like Reform, to have that alongside the major fundraising they're also involved in, the biggest ever donation from a living person in British politics in history, last week to Reform, £9 million. That kind of money plus a mass membership, they're really setting themselves up to succeed. I would add one thing as well, which is I don't think Labour have 250,000 members. I think they have 200,000 members because the way that it works with Labour is you aren't a lapsed member until 6 months have gone. Whereas with the Greens, we know they have 180,000 members because they'll have 180,000 live direct debits. And Labour are going in the opposite direction. So I genuinely think, Michael, here's the next big claim. because I said at the start of the year that Reform could overtake the Labour Party to be the biggest by membership in the country. Here's the next claim. I think probably by next spring, certainly before next May, it seems almost likely that the Greens will have more members than Labour. But of course, we won't be able to confirm that probably until 12 months from now, because Labour will withhold that. And again, that's significant. It's money, it's campaigning, it's knocking on doors. Does it get you majorities? No, but it's an important variable in doing politics.
It's ironic, actually, that the Labour membership would be falling because they're about to be some of the most powerful people in Britain if they choose the next Prime Minister, which presumably they will. One would imagine it will be Wes Streeting versus Angela Rayner, and the membership would likely go for Angela Rayner, according to current polling. So if you really care who's the next Prime Minister and you have strong opinions on one of those, then actually joining Labour might not be too bad an idea. I was just interested in how much it costs to join them, so I just put that in my ChatGPT now. It's provided links, so I'm pretty confident it hasn't just made up the answers. £70 a year to join Labour, £25 per year to join the Tories, £6 a year for the Greens, although you can pay up to £60. Reform, I looked on their very website, so I know that this is true, £25 a year, cheap. So Labour is relatively expensive. So even though they haven't got so many members, maybe they're getting more money than Reform from them, although not from that millionaire donor. Let's look at the polls, because I have been meaning to discuss these for a while on the show and haven't got quite around to it, because I wanted to discuss whether or not Reform have peaked. So if you're looking at this, you can see that sort of over the last year, or let's say actually up to April, so between July 2024 and April this year, Reform were on sort of a straight upward curve. But since the summer, they've basically been level. They're going up a bit, down a bit, but they're hovering at around 30. Labour actually seem to have levelled out at around 20. This is the average. Obviously, there'll be sort of certain outlier polls which look different. The Tories potentially levelling out there as well. Do you think that Reform have reached their peak? Is 30 as high as it goes for Nigel Farage?
Well, if Labour and the Tories get 20% each and Reform get 30%, then they probably get a big majority off that. Have they hit their peak? I have no idea. If you look at by-elections last night, they just picked up a council ward in Scotland. They picked up a council ward in Darlington, where Labour collapsed. And they came second in Caerphilly in Wales. So that suggests that they are performing very well. They're competitive in the three major nations of the UK, the three nations of Britain. So I think that it's kind of a bit too soon to saying have they peaked. I think stabilising at 30 and being the largest party by membership in the UK and getting the single biggest donation in the history of British politics from a living person is probably a pretty good 2025 if you're Nigel Farage.
Yeah, I mean, there's also an argument which is probably quite strong, which is it's difficult to get above 30 before people start doing tactical voting. And obviously, when you're speaking to a pollster now, there's nothing tactical about it. Whereas if at the point of the next general election, it looks like it's going to be, Reform versus Labour or Reform versus Greens or whatever, then people might sort of filter themselves into one of what look like the two parties who could put forward a Prime Minister. So I don't think it's their peak, but it seems like it might be for a while. I mean, I hope it's their peak, but yeah, I think it would be too soon to say that. It was a huge moment when the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant against Benjamin Netanyahu. The ICC has been used to, up to then, principally prosecuting, sending out arrest warrants for African leaders, people who aren't allied to any strong, powerful states, and aren't particularly strong in their own right. International justice was not supposed to come for Western allies. And the full extent of the pressure that was put on the court to avoid pursuing Israel is still coming to light. So The Guardian has reported that ICC Chief Prosecutor Karim Khan has told a court that Britain threatened to defund the International Court if it issued an arrest warrant for Netanyahu, so to completely defund it. Khan didn't name the official in question, but other reports have suggested the caller was then Foreign Secretary David Cameron. And on that call, which took place on the 23rd of April 2024, Khan was told that if he were to go ahead with the warrant, the UK could leave the Rome Statute altogether. So all that talk that our governments do about the importance of international law and human rights, they said, if you go after Israel, we're just going to leave the ICC. Obviously, we haven't left the ICC, but the threat was made. According to the chief prosecutor, in a separate call on May the 1st, the US Senator Lindsey Graham warned him that applying arrest warrants meant Hamas may shoot Israeli hostages, which I don't see what the logic would be there, but that was apparently another threat made by the Americans, I suppose, trying to sort of emotionally or morally blackmail him. And it was on the following day, according to Khan, this is what he says, that he first learned about the issue, which does seem to have ultimately brought him down, or at least taken him off the pitch when it comes to this prosecution. So this is from that Guardian story. Khan said he had learned for the first time about sexual misconduct allegations against him on the 2nd of May. He said that on the 6th of May, a third party revealed that someone without the alleged victim's consent had issued a complaint about his behaviour to the court's watchdog, the internal oversight mechanism. When the victim said she did not wish to pursue an investigation, the matter was dropped until an anonymous account on X started to reopen the allegations in October. So again, that's according to Karim Khan. Those allegations against Khan would become public the following May via an article in the Wall Street Journal. So that article reported on allegations made by an assistant in her 30s that she had been forced into unconsensual sex acts with Khan on numerous occasions, sort of in many different countries. She was said to be someone who travelled with Khan. In response to that story, Khan denied any misconduct. But the following week, he announced his decision to go on indefinite leave until any investigation into allegations of sexual assault could be concluded. So you have, according to Khan, you've got these threats being made to him by Western leaders. He doesn't sort of accede. He doesn't sort of give in to those threats. And then within a day or two, these allegations arise. And obviously, the timing of these allegations may make many viewers suspicious. This was a man being threatened by the most powerful states in the world, refusing to yield to their demands. There was then an allegation of sexual assault, and the man in charge of prosecuting Israel was suddenly taken off the pitch. Right? So suddenly, seems like this investigation isn't going so far because the guy who was taking the lead behind it is on gardening leave. In that Wall Street Journal, though, Wall Street Journal article, this is interesting because it's not a new article, but I hadn't read the whole of it before. They suggest the closeness in time between all of this. They also say it's not a coincidence, but they actually draw the causal arrows in the other direction. So they write this. So they say, the accusations facing Khan have become entwined with the international conflict over Gaza. Just 2.5 weeks after Khan learned of the allegations against him last spring, he surprised Israeli and US officials by announcing the most dramatic arrest warrant in the court's history for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. It was the first time in the ICC's history that the court's prosecutor sought a warrant for a Western-aligned, democratically elected leader, a move the US had been working to avert for months. The timing of the announcement has spurred questions about whether Khan was aiming to protect himself from the sexual assault allegations. The day before announcing the warrant application, Khan abruptly cancelled a trip to Israel and Gaza that he had previously said was important to make his decision. So it was on the 20th of May that Karim Khan announced he had applied to the pre-trial chamber for the arrest warrant. So it was then that there was this pre-trial sort of request. It wasn't until October that the arrest warrant was actually put forward. The argument being made in the Wall Street Journal is that Karim Khan did this to shore up support among those ICC member states opposed to Israel. Very long articles. I suppose I'm bringing this up because in the story about Karim Khan, there was a lot of emphasis put on the timings. And I assume the emphasis being put on the timings is because the case Karim Khan is making is that he believes that the order of events was he suggested that he would prosecute Israel. Threats were made. He didn't sort of give in. And then these allegations emerged. And that obviously sort of feeds a theory that maybe these were somewhat trumped up to take him off the pitch. The alternate argument is that he had these allegations made against him. And so then to distract everyone and shore up support for himself, he decided to prosecute Israel.
Why would you do that? Why would you do that? I know.
I don't find that second one particularly plausible.
I'm about to be accused of something. I'm going to do something without global precedent in human history. I'm about to make myself a media figure with massive profile to distract away from being accused of sexual assault, sexual indiscretions. That doesn't make, I mean, I'm not suggesting he did or didn't do it. If that was his thinking, it's really dumb. He doesn't seem a very bright guy. It doesn't really seem a particularly coherent explanation, in my view.
Yeah. I mean, the allegations, so sort of, he's saying when these allegations were initially made, the complainant didn't want to go, she has now made sort of significant allegations publicly against him. So on this show, we're not going to go through whether or not they are valid or not. Obviously, we're not in a position to know, but I thought it would just be useful to sort of put forward those two alternate explanations, and you can decide which one seems most plausible, or maybe neither. Maybe it is actually a coincidence that these two things happened at the same time. What I wanted to know from you, Aaron, I think something that we can sort of speak more confidently about, is the claim that David Cameron threatened to defund the ICC if it went ahead with an arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu.
Well, isn't it funny? The Tories were hung out to dry. The electorate had their guts for garters last summer in 2024. One of the major reasons was, of course, immigration, a perceived crisis around immigration, asylum, refugees. And not once did the Tories say, we are going to leave the European Convention on Human Rights, which would have been a very easy thing to do, to say it, not to actually deliver and execute on it, but to say it. It would have been a very easy thing to do. They've never once said that, as I understand it, until more recently you've had sort of outriders like Suella Braverman, or, we should at least consider it. But when they were in power, serious figures never really said we should leave the European Convention on Human Rights, which wouldn't stop the boats. But there's an argument that it would help. It would give the government in this country at Westminster more tools to deal with it. Okay. So even though that probably would have given them a couple more % in the polls, right? Certainly would have helped. It wouldn't have hurt. It wouldn't have hurt the Conservatives going into the last election talking about withdrawing Britain from the European Convention on Human Rights. It wouldn't have hurt them. Never heard it, though. And yet they're willing to say, we will defund the ICC. Nothing to do with this country. It's not going to save David Cameron's skin. It's not going to save Rishi Sunak as PM, but because of what you may or may not do in relation to a foreign country. A foreign country which, by the way, killed 3 of David Cameron's compatriots who were working as aid workers, who were killed by the IDF. They were former service personnel. And the response from the British government at the time was, the IDF, you investigate this yourselves. So it seems to me we have something of a picture with regards to particularly the previous government and how it related to the government of Benjamin Netanyahu. Subordination, deference, genuflection, We're on our knees. It seems very clear to me that for whatever reason, much of the British political class is cowed by Israel. But that's not just true of Labour, who are in charge now, it's also true of the Tories. And here's an amazing statistic, which I think might help clarify as to why that is. Before the last general election, of course, the Conservative Party were in government. They had a sizable majority. Over 70% of all Conservative MPs in the House of Commons were members of Conservative Friends of Israel. And these are exactly the kinds of campaign that the domestic pro-Israel lobby operates through. They would be incensed at the idea that Britain would be funding the ICC, would give legitimacy to the ICC, and that the ICC would do something like this. The idea that the ICC would apply the same standards that it does to African dictators or Putin to Benjamin Netanyahu. So I think it's quite obvious why Cameron is willing to defund the ICC, but they weren't willing to talk about leaving the European Convention on Human Rights more generally. And a lot of it, in my view, is to do with the strength of the domestic Israel lobby. They probably made some kind of political calculation. You know what? Not unreasonably. If we're on the wrong side of this, that's a bigger hit to us than I think most people are willing to publicly state. We can paint Labour as anti-Israel, anti-Semitic. Of course, they tried. They tried very hard to do all of that. Labour's defence mechanism was to basically have a cigarette paper between them and the Tories on most things relating to Israel. So pretty hard to make that land. So I think there's a clear issue here, and it's being catalysed by the domestic Zionist/Israel lobby.
Yeah, I suppose we didn't, so this was a sort of preemptive threat, and then he did put out an arrest warrant and we didn't leave the ICC, but there had been a change of government by then. So who knows what would have happened if David Cameron was still Foreign Secretary. Let's go on to another story about this, which, so there were lots of uncertainties when it came to sort of the first angle we were talking about here. It requires significant, proper investigation. This story, though, is absolutely confirmed, and it's crazy. So it's showing the extent to which the US will go to protect Israel from accountability. This is from the Associated Press, and it's sort of been syndicated in the Times of Israel. So it says, ICC officials confront curbs to travel, finances, in face of sweeping US sanctions. So it's a report on judges and prosecutors at the ICC who are struggling to live and work under the kind of US sanctions usually reserved for autocrats or crime bosses. So these are judges and prosecutors, like the most sort of professional people one can imagine. They're being treated like they're kind of mafiosos. So this is from that Times of Israel article. The court's top prosecutor, British national Karim Khan, had his bank accounts closed and his US visa revoked, while Microsoft cancelled his ICC email address. Canadian judge Kimberly Prost, who was named in the latest round of sanctions in August, immediately lost access to her credit cards. Amazon's Alexa stopped responding to her. Your whole world is restricted, Prost told the Associated Press last week. Then it goes on. Businesses and individuals risk substantial US fines and prison time if they provide sanctioned people with financial, material, or technological support, forcing many to stop working with them. Shortly after she was listed, Prost bought an e-book, The Queen's Necklace by Antal Zerb, only to later find it had disappeared from her device. It's the uncertainty, she said. They are small annoyances, but they accumulate. Deputy Prosecutor Nazhat Shamim Khan echoed her colleagues' concerns, saying, you're never quite sure when your card is not working somewhere, whether this is just a glitch or whether this is the sanction. Now, I should say, some of these sanctions and some of the accounts given here, lots of them relate to Israel. Some of them also related to when the ICC was planning to investigate war crimes in Afghanistan. So this is as much about sort of the brute force of the Americans as it is about Israel. But this is crazy. Like your Alexa stops responding to you. And the reason the Alexa stops responding to you is because Amazon could be sued if they gave this judge tech support, because giving her tech support. So like if she calls up and says, my laptop's broken, can you fix my laptop? Then you could be like, well, if I fix your laptop, I could be committing international crimes because I'm supporting a sanctioned person. So you have become a non-person because you have dared to go outside what the Americans consider acceptable.
Big tech and the American internet is a tool for imperialism, right? And I don't think people have begun to get their heads around this. There was a judge recently who gave Joe Bastani a suspended sentence. I'm sure you saw this. I'm sure you saw or heard about this. And there were people on X saying that the American state should sanction the judge that gave the sentence to Joe Bastani. Crazy right-wingers on X. You know what? In 12 months' time, that's the kind of thing we might be looking at. And that might sound crazy, but we are so dependent on the American internet for almost every single aspect of our lives, we're very vulnerable. Look at this show. You're probably watching this on YouTube. The tools that we use to edit it, Adobe tools. We'll publish this on Meta platforms, maybe, on an Alphabet platform. We're using YouTube, obviously. Other platforms too, TikTok. Of course, Mr. Ellison now has that. You might support Novara Media. Of course, you should support Novara Media. Go to support.novaramedia.com. We use Stripe, I think. We don't use American servers, but guess who do? Much the British government and the British security services. Keir Starmer, if he pisses off the Americans sufficiently tomorrow, let's say they use Microsoft Teams at number 10, gone, right? Let's say he has a Visa card, gone. Try use Apple Pay on the tube to get to work, gone. You know, we are so dependent now upon US infrastructure, and we've got increasingly dependent over the last 25 years. It's actually frightening. And it's now time that as a country, we start building in resilience and also talking about the construction of a post-American internet. Because without a post-American internet, countries aren't going to have meaningful sovereignty, right? We're not going to have meaningful sovereignty. organizations like the ICC will not be able to meaningfully exist because the Americans can basically just, I don't know if you've seen Enemy of the State.
I haven't.
Enemy of the State. I think it was originally with Gene Hackman, and then it was remade with Will Smith, and the state basically tries to, you're a wanted man by the state, your cards don't work, nothing works, the security services are after you. They don't need to do that anymore, right? They don't need people chasing you. They just need to debank you. They need to cut your cards. They need to cut your digital ID and digital products that you use. That's it. You can't access Amazon. That's it.
Well, you might not be able to access. So this is obviously the ebook disappearing from your device.
That's DRM, right?
What does DRM stand for?
Digital rights management. So that's a rare example of a good which can just be turned off. A really good example of this is the John Deere tractors in Ukraine. The Russians took a bunch of John Deere tractors. They're produced in the United States. John Deere, they have a kill switch. We didn't know this before. We now know they do because they were just turned off remotely from the US. I suspect the same, by the way, is true for that MacBook. But anyway.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's because it's not rare now. That's the model of so many products we have. Like if you have Tesla, then this is what you're talking about, Cory Doctorow. If you have a Tesla, then you have to pay a subscription fee to get the sort of premium product, which gives you full self-driving, whatever, and lets you charge your battery to sort of the full amount. But obviously, the corollary of that is if you suddenly get sanctioned and you're driving a Tesla, then presumably they're within their rights. Well, it's not even they're within their rights. Maybe they're obligated to turn off the system.
Yeah.
So it's not just that your card and stuff, you can't purchase new things. It's that the things you already own in your house just start to gradually turn off.
Your phone, your laptop,
your fridge,
your car.
Fridges have subscriptions now. So this is very worrying. Yeah, I mean, this laptop, presumably they can. Can you? I'll ask ChatGPT in the break. The United States is struggling to find a consistent justification for seizing an oil vessel off the coast of Venezuela. On Thursday, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt suggested they were just trying to enforce sanctions.
Department of Justice requested and was approved for a warrant to seize a vessel because it's a sanctioned shadow vessel known for carrying black market sanctioned oil to the IRGC, which you know is a sanctioned entity. So the president is committed to stopping the illegal flow of drugs into our country. He's also fully committed to effectuating this administration's sanction policy, and that's what you saw and the world saw take place yesterday.
So she's saying it's about sanctions. This was a sanctioned ship. And it was taking oil to a sanctioned country, Iran in this case. So therefore, this was just Donald Trump, who's obviously, a stickler for the rules, enforcing the laws of the United States. Soon after, though, Donald Trump said the action against Venezuela was for a different reason. So he said it was to stem the flow of immigrants and drugs.
So it has to do with a lot of things. They've treated us badly, and I guess now we're not treating them so good. If you look at the drug traffic by sea is down 92%. And nobody can figure out who the 8% is because I have no idea. Anybody getting involved in that right now is not doing well. And we'll start that on land, too.
The idea that seizing an oil tanker can be seen as a legitimate part of a war on drugs is obviously completely nonsense. The US has suggested it will take the oil from the tanker for itself, so not exactly subtle. And sources suggest it plans to seize more such tankers. It might also just be a conveyance of brute strength, though, which is what most attracts Trump. So these images you're seeing now, they were released by the White House on Thursday. Trump has, of course, previously shared footage of US military aircraft striking speedboats traveling from Venezuela to the US, allegedly ferrying narcotics. Again, this is completely extrajudicial. So how should we make sense of the shifting US justifications for their latest attack on Venezuelan interests? I spoke earlier to writer and analyst Juan Rojas.
So the administration and supporters of the administration, from what I've seen, they've really given just kind of an all of the above rationale for doing this. Before seizing this tanker, which is pretty significant, it's the largest ever seized. And it's the first Venezuelan one, I believe, that has been seized. The strikes they were talking about, it's because of the drugs. Even that rationale is extremely dubious. They presented no evidence. It's likely that some of the boats, maybe even a majority of the boats, were carrying drugs, but it's quite possible that many of them were not. And, Venezuela, in the grand scheme of things, is not a huge producer of drugs. It is a transit country for like Colombian cocaine, but even then, like the total amount of cocaine that passes through Venezuela, it's thought to be at most like 10%. So that rationale is dubious. Obviously, this tanker didn't have any drugs that we know of, and otherwise we probably would have heard about it. They've said that this is in order to get Venezuela to comply with sanctions. This tanker, it was actually going to Cuba. Historically, Venezuela has sent billions of dollars since 1999 worth of oil to Cuba. Cuba's extremely reliant on Venezuelan oil for its power plants, and also resells that oil on the global market, marks it up, and has historically made a significant profit. Obviously, receives less than during the boom years of like the 2000s under Chavez. But so yeah, you can really see this as part of the maximum pressure campaign. Some like influencers in MAGA, and I think even elected officials have said that it's just, we do this just because we can, and that's kind of been the MO of a lot of Trumpism, that it's just like, we're powerful, we can do what we want. If you're a state that can't really do anything about it. I believe, yeah, it was like Kevin Hassett yesterday that said that, or no, someone on CNN that said, we did this, and what are the Venezuelans going to do about it? Nothing. So it's really all of the above. I definitely see a connection here to just and that's really the through line for everything that's going on with Venezuela. Just the kind of neoconservative foreign policy. I'm in Fort Lauderdale, near Miami. The like Cuban American community, which the Secretary of State Marco Rubio was the Florida senator. He's was a former Florida senator and a Miami native. Uh, this is something that many Cuban Americans down here have called for a long time. They hate the fact that Venezuela has been propping up Cuba for a long time, which in their opinion is kind of the head of the snake of regional leftist governments, especially within the Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela.
The Trump administration, as you say, using the kind of all of the above strategy when it comes to why are we doing this. Can we discern what is the real plan? What is the real strategy? Because I suppose if what you're trying to do is keep anti-communists in Florida happy, then ideally what they're going to want is regime change. But I suppose also just being seen to be bullying Maduro or the Cubans might get you some brownie points. I mean, which of those do you think it is?
Yeah, so in the way a lot of this administration works with regards to all of its constituencies, including like extremely conservative, neoconservative Cuban Americans, is just signaling. So it's just, we need to show our base that we're doing something. And the strikes are interesting. It's pretty genius in a way, because it manages to satisfy both a lot of like the MAGA base and like the rural heartland that is like upset over overdoses, mostly fentanyl overdoses, which is why this is insane, because Venezuela produces no fentanyl, zero, according to the DEA, and is only responsible for the trafficking of a small amount of cocaine. But anyway, uh, a lot of supporters, like rank and file supporters of the administration, will say, "Yeah, this is revenge for fentanyl and blah 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 blah. Blah. We're sticking it to traffickers. The war on drugs hasn't worked, so now we're going a step further. We're just blowing these guys up in the ocean." And that also obviously pleases a lot of neoconservative Latinos down here that just want to stick it to tyrannical leftist governments like the one in Cuba or in Venezuela. It's it's as far as what exactly they want to do, it's really hard to tell. I would say, Trump does seem to have an aversion to putting boots on the ground, and that is reportedly something that they are afraid of. And we look at the MO of what happened in Iran earlier this year. Like, they did those strikes, and the justification of the nuclear weapons and whatever, which also is very dubious. But to be fair, yeah, they dropped the bombs, and then that was it. They wrapped up the 12-day war and called it a day, and we haven't heard about it since for now. So in this case, most likely what they would try to do is just do some strikes on like critical infrastructure in Venezuela. The problem though is a fear, and apparently they do have this fear in the administration as well, that just that would lead to like regime collapse, which is what they want, but they're also scared of like creating like a Libya-esque scenario. That's something that's been really talked about, especially from opponents on the right on this issue. So I've made that case as well. So it's one thing that what they really ideally would want, evidently, is just Maduro to step down on his own and just hand over power to the opposition, which he's more or less offered to do according to various reports. But I guess I don't know. They're trying to find the perfect sweet spot, which likely doesn't exist. I don't know. It's hard to exactly tell.
I wasn't aware of that. Maduro has, you say, he's shown willingness to just hand over power to the opposition. What's the story there? That seems like a big deal.
Well, if I if I was more sympathetic to what the administration was doing, I would say that Maduro can't be trusted. Whatever he says, it's a lie. And to be fair, yeah, there is some truth to that. He's an extremely cunning. He seems really dumb, but he's an extremely cunning political operator, or at least the totality of his regime is, and the people advising him. That said, there is pretty credible reporting that has said that he's offered to like step down in 2030, which is like when the next elections would be. The New York Times reported that he offered Trump to redirect all oil sales from China to the U.S. and also allow American companies to like take control over Venezuela's like gold and mineral exports and slash contracts with Iran and Russia as well. So he just wants his regime to survive, and also if he has to step down, which sure 2030 is a ways away, but if he were to step down, that he can have like a graceful exit and live out the rest of his days in peace, presumably in Cuba or Russia, who knows. But again, that's probably just not good enough for Rubio. Most likely him and the other Rubio has staffed a lot of the administration with allies from Miami. A lot of the ambassadors in Latin America are from Miami and allies of Rubio, also in the State Department. And a lot of the obviously a lot of Trump's administration in general are Floridians. They might not be of the uber neoconservative kind with regards to Latin America, but they're definitely intimately familiar with a lot of these narratives about narco-terrorism in Venezuela and blah, 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 blah. So I would say, yeah, that Rubio most likely and his allies, they just want Maduro out tomorrow. That's their goal. And if they can't get that, I guess that's not good enough.
That was Juan David Rojas speaking to me earlier today. We'll be putting out a longer version of that interview tomorrow. He was a very interesting guy. He's got a Substack called Social Democracy with Populist Characteristics, which is very appealing to me. What do you make of this story, Aaron? How have you been following it?
I love the White House press officer or press spokesperson saying that the oil was on the way to Iran. It's like saying that we're going to be exporting butter to Ireland or smelly cheese to the French. They've got enough oil in Iran, I think. So, yeah, it doesn't quite make sense. And that thing about fentanyl as well. I mean, I've never really heard South America having I might be completely ignorant here, having much of an issue with regards to these kinds of substances compared to the United States and Canada.
No, it doesn't come from Latin America. I think maybe some of it comes from China. I'm not sure, but it doesn't come from Latin America. That's just made up.
Yeah.
So most of the drugs.
I mean, there must be like one fentanyl addict in like Venezuela. I'm sure there's somebody.
Yeah, or maybe they take it, but they don't.
Very, very
they don't
marginal.
produce it. They have to produce it for it to be a problem for Donald Trump. So he's making that one.
I mean,
up.
why would they? I mean, the whole point of fentanyl. You correct me if I'm wrong here. Fentanyl was meant to be a substitute for heroin.
Well,
because the price of heroin went up on the global market, and so people started to basically turn to fentanyl. Is that right?
Well, the original, is it not the same as, is it not one of the opioids that was originally prescribed by doctors, no? Or am I getting confused? Am I getting two things
No,
mixed
similar.
up?
It's a synthetic opioid. Yeah.
Yeah, so I thought it was that doctors prescribed it because they thought it was safer than heroin and less addictive, but they were wrong. But then I suppose once you've got the ones that aren't prescribed by a doctor, then it just gets way worse because now you've got this dodgy chemical
Well,
construct.
as I understand it, and our dear viewers out there who are watching, maybe you can correct me, but basically, when you get the return of the Taliban, the costs of heroin increases quite significantly. So you all of a sudden get a significant increase in demand for things like fentanyl or just synthetic opioids. And that's the kind of broader political context we're looking at right now. So...
But that would affect people in Latin America just as much as America, right? Because they make cocaine, they don't make heroin.
Well, no, that's my point,
So
right? You got the good stuff at home. You don't need to make this, this bathed up fentanyl.
Yeah, that's probably true. Although cocaine's not, is it cocaine a painkiller? I suppose it'll distract you, maybe.
I love this, Michael playing dumb, as if he doesn't know. It's a stimulant, right? It's not a painkiller. Is it?
It will numb certain regions.
Well, it certainly does that. Although I wouldn't be speaking from experience.
I don't know if it's going to help with serious back pain. I do recommend watching. It's a local anesthetic, apparently. I'm told in my ear. And yeah, local to where you're using it. So presumably it wouldn't work in the same way that an opioid would for relief. Just as addictive though. Oh, this is a conversational one. How are we going to do this? We haven't done this before. Aaron.
Michael, good to see you.
You have been pumping out the Christmas content this year. You're obsessed. I see you. From your ex account, you were Christmas shopping in London yesterday with your beautiful family. You took it as an opportunity for a dig at the Americans. I know you can't resist going on your phone, whatever you're doing. We've got your wonderful pictures there. London is stunning this time of year, from the Wren churches to the street decorations to the shops. The Yanks spreading lies about it, failing to celebrate Christmas, are simply upset that their country is a business that got out of hand. The Virginia company, Heritage. We'll come back to this tweet in a moment, but
all true.
I'm worried people will think that we're doing a whole segment based on a tweet. So we're going to come back to that later because actually Aaron has been doing some serious thought about Christmas. The patriotic celebration of the great British Christmas was a bit more toned down, but also fleshed out in a column for Unheard. So inspired by your recent sit-down with Cory Doctorow, I believe, it's headlined, "The Enshittification of Christmas, Convenience Has Displaced Community." And the centerpiece of the article is a department store called Beal's, which I have to admit I hadn't heard of. I don't think they've ever had one in London. But tell me about it. How did you construct this whole theory of the enshittification of Christmas via a department store in Bournemouth?
Well, I'll be quick about Beal's. It's a fascinating story. It was opened in 1881. It is just in front of the resting place of Mary Shelley, the author of Frankenstein. She's buried there along with her father. And apparently the heart of Percy Shelley, believe it or not, just the heart. And allegedly it's the first department store, certainly in the country, to have a live Father Christmas. Maybe the world. Maybe. Although there's no photographic evidence from 1885. It has this very central role in the history of the town. I went there as a child, and it closed in 2020. And now, like much of Bournemouth's town centre, it's derelict and really having a tough time. And you go through many of these places, and it's perfectly understandable why much of the electorate has given up on the big two parties. I get it. If you don't need the M25, you might not understand. If you live outside the M25, it's kind of very self-evident. Going fast forward to where we are now, I remember, I'm getting old now, Michael, I'm 41. I remember before 2008, people would be looking at the economics and business editors on TV every year. They'd be saying, this is the biggest Christmas ever. People are spending more money than ever. Robert Peston would be a business correspondent for the BBC or something. And you just see people behind him at Selfridges or John Lewis packed out. It was a cultural meme. Every Christmas, more money, more consumption, more goods and services, more capitalism, right? And many people, including myself, would think, oh, this is horrible. This is really at odds with the spirit of Christmas, which is about gratitude and giving and community and just coming together with your loved ones and goodwill to all men. As a socialist, I love that idea, right? Goodwill to all people. But now you look back at those scenes of people actually buying stuff, and I'm nostalgic for it. Because believe me, that's a hell of a lot better than what we've got now in Bournemouth, right? Beals is shut down, House of Fraser shut down, the M&S is gone, the BHS is gone. All the stores have gone, rough sleeping and drugs. Now, I know I sound like Donald Trump when I say this. In that article I wrote, you have somebody who's a CEO of a business of On Buy. He moved his business to Bournemouth in 2016, 2017. He said, I'm moving it back, and he has since moved it back. They relocated to London, right? He said there's less drug abuse on the streets of London than there are in Bournemouth. True. So I look at those scenes of, consumption and capitalism. Yes, not a fan of that. But people actually being together is a lot better than what we have now. And I mean, I do Christmas shopping as much as anybody else. Michael, the spirit of Christmas should not be one-click buy now shopping. How's that Christmas? This act of globalized real-time logistics. What's special about that? What's special about buying something like that? What makes it any different from all the crap I buy every other day of the year? Now, I'm not being whimsical about shopping, right? I know it can sometimes be very annoying. It can be very busy. But there was a certain romance to going to somewhere special, buying something special for somebody special in your life. It was an experience. And by the way, if you go to wealthier parts of the country, it's still like that, right? You go to London, you go to the West End, you've got Bond Street, you've got Fortnum, you've got Hamleys, the toy shop. If you've got money, you can still do it, right? If you go to Winchester, which is a wealthier place in the south in Bournemouth or Portsmouth or Southampton, you still got it because there's richer people there. So this now seems to be almost a luxury good, which wasn't the case 25 years ago. Being able to go somewhere physical that's near to you to buy special things for special people in your life, that was a fundamental reality of everybody's world when I was growing up. But now it's something that we view as almost a positional good. It's something that is only undertaken by people with lots of money. It's a status symbol. The idea of buying stuff in a department store for Christmas for other people, it's a status symbol. It's a statement about who you are and how wealthy you are in some ways. So I've been ruminating on it a lot, Michael. And I think that there's so much connection between our lack of industrial policy in this country, not building or making anything, the fact that we're so dependent upon American logistics and infrastructure, the American internet, and also, and I'll finish with this, a complete vacuity running through our culture now. I loved watching Stranger Things. It's great TV. I'm not going to diminish it. I watched all of the episodes. I'm looking forward to watching the rest of it. 3 episodes on Christmas Day. But also the fact that there are 3 episodes on Christmas Day is kind of a statement, isn't it?
So you're supposed to... I've actually never watched Stranger Things.
Oh, here we go.
You're supposed to watch 3 hours of it on Christmas Day.
Probably more than 3 hours, right? And then the final episode, I think, will be on the 31st. So for people who aren't aware of this, Stranger Things is about interdimensional demonic creatures, okay? So the idea that on Christmas Day, your kid's going to be watching 3 hours of Stranger Things on an iPad by themselves, I just find that quite sad.
Yeah.
Christmas used to be about families coming together, you watch TV together, you eat together. It's not always perfect, right? Some people hate it. And before people have a go at me, well, some people don't have families. I had no brothers or sisters growing up. I had a stepbrother, stepsister. My parents weren't together. So I get it. But lots of people do live like that and used to live like that. And I feel that between the enshittification of Christmas shopping, one click, buy now, same rigmarole as every other day of the week, every other week of the year, between that and also our media consumption, again, increasingly American-centric, enshittified, Prime, Apple TV, Netflix, and bugger all else, I feel like something has gone really wrong in the core of our society. And saying that what went before, say 25 years ago, isn't an anti-capitalist statement. That wasn't socialism. And again, I don't want people thinking I'm making some sort of radical argument here. I'm not. I'm actually making a conservative argument, right? I'm arguing for something in the very recent past. But what I'm saying is that wasn't perfect. It's not my utopia. But it does seem to me, as somebody who's experienced both ways of being, that's a much healthier way of doing things. And I worry about young people growing up in this other way of doing things. And if this is the trajectory we're on, I don't think it's a good one. And I think we should start reflecting on that as a society.
Yeah, I mean, I've got lots of sympathy with this argument. Let's bring this to life with some pictures of Beals. I said I've never been, but it looks like it was lovely in the 30s. This is a picture of Beals in 1936. And then you got Beals in 2010.
The Luftwaffe, Michael.
Yeah, now, oh, is that why?
Yeah.
Because I thought this was going to be a story about sort of like bad planning, but
No.
literally the Luftwaffe bombed Beals.
Not this time. The Luftwaffe bomb Beals. Two stunning buildings in Bournemouth, the Hotel Metropole and Beals. Probably two of the nicest buildings in the whole town. They bombed both of them. So that's why. And it's a shame.
What's your view of, because you're often now referenced on, there's a big section of Twitter which doesn't like brutalism and likes tradition. And you're now sort of talked about a lot on it. They think they've got this ally in Aaron Bastani, because normally they think of sort of this, the left like things to be, built by the state. They like it to look like the Barbican, basically. And they're saying, like, we want things to look traditional again. You're a bit of a traditionalist. What's your view about why it went? Because I suppose there's an argument that it's taste. But I think there's also an argument that it is our move to a service economy, and also Baumol's cost disease. You know about this?
Of course. But
So
go on. How's it relevant here?
Well, because it just means that you have to pay builders a lot more than you would have done in the 19th century.
Oh, of course.
And so we like, because it's one of those things where you think, shouldn't things get better as you get richer as a society? But actually, because builders are going to cost more as you get richer as a society, relative to everything else, because it's difficult to increase productivity in building, then you are going to have, like, buildings are just going to get shitter forever. Is that true?
There's something to it. Just to be clear, I like the Barbican.
Mm-hmm.
I like Royal Festival Hall. I like lots of 20th century architecture. But the point is, it needs to be visually coherent, doesn't it? The idea that you're going to have a whole street of Victorian, Edwardian buildings, and then you're just going to plonk a 1960s office block in the middle of it, it looks awful, right? But if something's visually coherent, like Brasilia, a modernist city, I don't think anybody's going to say, this is ugly, it looks out of place. So it's about visual coherence. And I think that's where the city surveyors and architects of the 20th century went very badly wrong. So there's a time and place for that. And I'd also add one more thing as well, Michael. Victorian architecture is modern architecture. It was made using modern methods with, technologies that we would, be familiar with today. It was often modular. You were using steel. You were using glass. So this idea that Victorian architecture is kind of like, 1,000 years old. The Crystal Palace is kind of like the genesis of the modern skyscraper. Now, I think that the Crystal Palace was built in 1857. Maybe I can be corrected, right? That is arguably the world's first ever modernist building. So this idea that Victorian architecture is, trad and classical, I don't think that's true. I think it's actually some of the best of modern architecture and some of the best of modern production principles.
Okay, another question for you that I had from your article in Unheard, where you sort of made it again about American tech, which is an argument you make a lot, which I've got a lot of sympathy for. I think it's a strong argument. But if there were a British Amazon, would that help the high street? Because, ultimately, I think, Amazon are nefarious, and sort of in your interview with Cory Doctorow, there's a strong argument about how it has enshittified even sort of the experience of using Amazon. But if you had a British-owned Amazon and it still delivered parcels to your door for free, if you signed up as a monthly member and it came the next day, would that not screw over the high street just as much? Is it not one of those things like with, where lots of people say the problem with smartphones? Well, there's two arguments. Is the problem with smartphones and social media that they are driven for profit? Or is it just that this is a technology where whoever is running it is going to have these massive externalities?
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like internet shopping is maybe similar. Whether it's Amazon or some British version of Amazon, the fact that people now have this convenience where they can get it delivered to their house, unless you uninvent the technology, the high street ain't coming back.
So a lot of what's going on with Amazon isn't technology. A lot of it's policy. Rewind a second. So some things like digital payment systems, I would rather have a British visa than an American visa. Yes, it's not socialist, but right now we have a situation where the Americans could basically turn off all of our transactions infrastructure. Stripe, Visa, Apple Pay, we'd be in big trouble. Novara wouldn't be able to take any money. You probably wouldn't be able to get paid. You wouldn't be able to buy things, etc. It could be quite hard, right? So There are some things like that where, yes, it's not a socialist argument, it's more of a sovereigntist argument. That stuff should be here. AWS, the security services probably shouldn't be using AWS web servers, right? Use a British version. It's not a socialist argument.
So AWS, Amazon Web Services.
Yeah, it's a sovereigntist argument because you're probably not sovereign as a country if your security services are literally relying on an American company to just exist. Okay. On the Amazon thing, you're right. Yeah, that's fundamentally the same thing. So you've got two paths here. I would make the argument just to increase taxes on Amazon quite significantly.
Yep.
And people say, well, no, they'll not leave. No, Amazon is a license to print money, as Corey talks about in our conversation, which is just phenomenal. Just the search rankings for merchants, right? So when you look for a product on Amazon, you probably realize that the highest listed goods aren't necessarily the best ones. They're not the best reviewed. They're not the most viewed. Nothing, okay? That's rigged. Those merchants have to pay for better search rankings. Just that business alone makes Amazon $38 billion a year. Corey says for this year that rises to $58 billion. That's more than the entire revenue of GlaxoSmithKline and what's the other one? AstraZeneca. So two of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world, two of the biggest UK companies. Just that one feature where you rig search for merchants on Amazon makes more money, brings in more money, not necessarily all profitable, brings in more money than those two companies get. So when you look at the numbers involved with Amazon, you think, well, look, couldn't we be doing things like a certain charge on Amazon for things like Prime, etc.? Even if that's only raising 5 to 10 billion a year, you could put that towards a pot which helps to revive the high street.
Yep.
Now, we can't go back to the 1990s, but we can establish a level playing field. Another one, most favored nation. This is outrageous. People don't know this. Most favored nation is, if you sell on Amazon, that has to be your cheapest price. So if
it's their version of most favored nation, because most favored nation is if you
Let's
trade.
call most favored nation, but because it sounds weird because we're not talking about countries, right? Yeah. But they have to be the most favored platform for sale. Look, this is a uniball, erasable gel pen, right? Let's say I'm the merchant for this and I want to sell it for 75p. But Amazon say, look, we've got all these extra charges. If you want to be in Prime and you want to be able to do this and access this and you have all these widgets to sell, all of a sudden your margin declines and you say, you know what, I'm going to have to sell this for £1. Okay. But I can sell it for 70p at Tesco or 80p at Asda. Amazon say, no, we have to be the cheapest place. And if we're not the cheapest place, they can be equal, but we have to be the cheapest. If we're not, then you're going to maybe lose the ability to sell. You might not have access to Prime. You'll not show up on search rankings. We'll punish you if we're not the cheapest place to sell. What happens? The other places increase the price because they're saying, well, look, Amazon charges £1, well, and we're charging 70p. We're going to increase our price. So Amazon, through most favored nation, actually is increasing the costs of certain goods across the entire economy. They're generating some inflation. Also, it's anti-competition, right? Because, of course, if Tesco is, forget even a local family-owned business, Tesco
is not allowed to undercut Amazon.
So, family businesses...
And that's how they compete, which is they say it's going to be cheaper in our store than it is in your store.
Yeah.
But Amazon say if you sell in our store, it cannot be cheaper anywhere.
Precisely. And so people think Amazon's cheap because of the technology and the logistics, and it's just, the tech, that's just the facts. No, they've rigged the system through a bunch of things, which mean that literally some of the biggest supermarkets in Europe can't compete with what they do. So I would get rid of that. I don't think that should be allowed. I think if you taxed a few things, if you prohibited a few things, I think you've got a much more, much fairer setup for offline business. Finally, books. We don't charge for VAT on books in this country, right? I think if you buy a book online, you should pay VAT.
Yeah.
And if you buy it offline in a bookshop, because that has huge positive externalities for community and it's a public space, then you shouldn't pay VAT on the book that you buy offline. That seems like quite a sensible thing. And guess what? That will raise some money. Not huge money, probably raise you a couple of £100 million a year for the exchequer. And I think it encourages good consumer behaviours. So there's lots we can do. And I think this whole, it was inevitable, it's technology, it's bullshit, it's a cop-out. And that's deployed by people who have no interest in being curious or critiquing the status quo, because the status quo means they get paid pretty damn well.
I think this is what blue labour should be, like a kind of sort of somewhat allied with social conservatism, but also kind of left wing, anti big tech. And you say, what we're going to do is we're going to put massive taxes on Amazon and we're going to subsidize the high street. Because at the moment, we do the opposite, right? The high street, you have to pay very expensive business rates. And Amazon, well, I mean, they'll have to pay business rates on their warehouses, but obviously they pay less tax than people on the high street because of the business rates issue. If you have a kind of soft lefty, blue labour-y, we're going to save the high street by taxing the Amazon giants to save small businesses, then that's popular. That's the kind of thing you should do. I also think be very authoritarian with smartphones. Like I love the Australian thing of saying we're banning them. Go out and play with your friends. I think a more paternalistic state, which is saying we are going to stand up to big tech, not for any sort of obviously left-wing reason, not because sort of like they're evil capitalists or even inequality, but because we want to protect things that everyone values: childhood, running around in fields playing football, department stores. I feel like that is an untapped, very promising area of politics that sort of a decent political entrepreneur could walk into in Britain.
Couldn't agree more. I'd also add, you might live outside the M25 and you go to your local high street, you live in small town Britain or a smaller city, and you think, well, this is just what everywhere's like. The bookshop's shut, M&S left the high street, the department store's shut. Big tech and changing consumption habits have killed where I live. That's not the case in much of Europe, right? That's not the case in France, Italy, Poland. I mean, I couldn't believe, Michael, when I was in Poland, even smaller cities in Poland, compare them to smaller cities here. We've really screwed up. Even North America. I remember being in Vancouver a few years ago, watching baseball in a department store bar. Cliche, my wife was shopping, right? And I was with these old guys watching baseball over a beer. It was fantastic. I was like, this is the life. This was what boomers used to do. Why can't we just have this back again? Why can't I go to a bar, a nice bar, standing up in a department store, have a pint of lager, watching some Premier League football on a Saturday? Because all that shit, this was normal stuff. It's been taken away from normal people. Now you need to spend infinity amounts of money. Nobody even watches live football anymore in this country, unless you go to the pub, because barely anyone can afford it. Or people get the Jack's boxes, which, bring it from Bain Sports in the Arabian Peninsula. This is normal, everyday, common luxury, which over the last 25, 30 years has just been stripped from us. And I thought you're right. It shouldn't be a radical thing to say, look, there were some nice things, not everything, lots of bad things from the past we've gotten rid of and we've left behind. Great, right? I like the fact that people can get divorced or get an abortion or same-sex marriage, or people are more tolerant of others that aren't like them. That's all good stuff. But there are other things that maybe back in the day, like being able to pop your head into a local bookshop, that was a nice thing. What do we do to make that more usual again? Or the fact that people were more likely to drink in a pub rather than get a six-pack from the supermarket and drink at home by themselves. How it was before was probably better. How do we do that? Again, it's really easy, right? I would rig the tax system against drinking at home and in favor of hospitality, of people being able to attend convivial spaces to eat and drink. I don't see why that's such a radical policy. I mean, it shouldn't be, right? That to me is just common sense.
I don't really understand why they're not doing it. Because the vested interest, I suppose Tesco is a big vested interest. But sort of politically, small business owners are kind of more important. I mean, yeah, the supermarkets, the free marketeers will tell you that, no, you've got to let this happen like this. But we're already taxing alcohol quite a lot anyway. It just does seem like, why aren't we, as you say, fixing the tax system? Well, I don't mean fixing just as in repairing. I mean fixing as in like rigging. I want to rig the tax system in favor of brick and mortar shops and brick and mortar pubs.
Yeah. Zoran Mamdani had that and this was great. It was supply side radicalism, where he was saying, you've got your halal, it's $10. I want to get it down to 8. I want to work out, how do we get it down to 8? Wouldn't it be amazing, Michael? And I understand not everybody watching or listening drinks alcohol. We're sensitive to that, of course, but lots of people do. At least sometimes. And it's certainly like a totemic thing within British culture. The price of something, often a pint of lager, is up there, right? Wouldn't it be amazing if a politician said, look, we now know in 2025, the median cost of a pint in the UK is $5.20 or whatever. I am starting a commission of some kind to work out how do we get that down to £4? And that's not through lower labour costs, everything bar that, how do we get it done? Is it business rates? Is it energy? Is it the fact that there's actually big margins somewhere on the supply chain, which is squeezing people elsewhere? Can we help those people being squeezed? That would be, I think, really common sense, effective populist politics. And you were saying, why aren't people doing this? I think there's two reasons. Again, there are no incentives. There are very high incentives to just keep on doing the same old shit that everybody's been doing for 25 years. There's no incentives, especially in a first past the post system, right? Especially when you don't have primaries. We just keep producing the same people saying the same shit over and over again. Really important. Keir Starmer and this Labour government are terrible, but they're also the most radical and innovative in a really long time, right? And they're fucking terrible. But they're still, you look at how, Great British Rail been launched, how it's landed. That's quite innovative government. And I think, like I say, the incentives are bad, but also all the people in politics in this country all come from and all live in the same places. So they all have the same ideas, right? Look, and you think it's bad on the left. My God, it's bad on the right, Michael. All they say on the right, there's a problem, lower tax.
And less immigrants.
Yeah, less immigrants, lower tax. If we just have, 5% off income tax and 5% off corporation tax, the country will boom. No, it wouldn't. We know that. We tried that, by the way. They cut the top rate of tax under Osborne in the first years of the coalition government. We got our corporation tax down. There was still zero growth. But there's just a lack of imagination because of the people in politics in this country.
Someone else says gyms are a good third space. Gyms are great. Leisure centres especially great.
People are going there because there's. I agree.
You can't do it at home though. But that's because you can't go to the gym at home, whereas you can get your shopping delivered to you at home. And gyms are potentially going to the gym is a bit cheaper than going to the pub.
It's cheap, and also, but it's a young person's thing.
Mm. All right, subsidise the pubs, more tax on booze in supermarkets, a British version of Amazon, or at the very least, charge a sort of extra VAT on everything Amazon sells, so that we can lower business rates and it will be revenue neutral.
I think, Lina Khan, that we need a British Lina Khan to come in and say, we can do stuff which is very easy, very low cost, and it would help the British high street by 30, 40%. And it's not going to cost the consumer a penny. I think that's really possible.
And it's all normie coded.
All normie coded.
Not lefty coded.
Well, it's. I think for some the British public on some things is actually reasonably social democratic. So normie coded on public healthcare in this country is socialised healthcare. So I think high street's kind of similar-ish argument.
All right, let's wrap up there. We won't say happy Christmas. We've got a whole other week of these shows before, but this wasn't a sort of Christmas special. But just because you had that picture in those articles, I thought it'd be interesting.
We didn't talk about me flipping the proverbial finger to the Yanks, but that's okay.
Oh, yeah, go on. Very quickly.
Next week. No, I'm just tired of all this nonsense on social media of them wanging on about the Norwegian tree in Trafalgar Square. They're going to be social media checks of UK nationals potentially going into the United States. I want social media checks of American nationals coming into this country. If you said a damned word about that Norwegian tree that celebrates peace on this continent after the defeat of fascism, you ain't coming in. Access denied.
Hear, hear. Get some culture. I mean, they've got a lot of culture. Well, I don't know. What did you say that you said there? What was your dig about the Virginia colony?
Well, look, I like the East Coast of America. That is a real country, but fundamentally, the United States, and this is key, is a business that got out of hand. It's the Virginia company. It was a business that got ideas above its station, and 250 years later, a little bit more, 300 years later, it's a superpower.
Let's wrap up. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Come back on Monday for another live stream from 6 p.m. Have a fantastic weekend. Please do frequent your local bookstore, department store, pub. No drinks at home this weekend, guys, for Britain. For now, you've been watching Novara Media. Good night.